Kia ora, kia ora. I hope my voice is alright for the volume. Let me check actually to make sure the whole live is alright because bish, the live doesn't live lately. Not me thinking that was a double tap. But yeah, it was a moth on the computer and I thought it was like the TikTok double tap thing. Hmm. Okay, so the microphone. Maybe my voice is a little bit quiet. But we are good other than that. So today's topic of the video, as you can tell by the title, because I was sitting here thinking, what should I make a video about? Because I don't want to do a full length video. I'd rather do like a quick 10-15 minute video right now. And then I was like, bish, sometimes the best plan is no plan at all. Like, especially when I was looking at these cards, I got this one card and I was like, okay, I see. I see what's going on. And then that also reminded me about how the astrology is, made me want to check the astrology as well. But the reason as well why I put in the quotes best plan is because really there is not really a such thing as a best plan when it comes to things. At the end of the day, there's certain things that may be best for your certain particular situation at that point in time, but even then that's up for debate because there could have been another situation that could be equally as beneficial, but maybe because of your perspective and how you see it, you see one situation as more beneficial than the other. Like, yeah, I mean, that's pretty simple. I feel like that can be understood overall. And then when it comes to, of course, just any situation in general, it's not always going to be the best plan to go about that situation the same exact way every single time as well. So a plan in itself, because you're planning ahead for something, it's not necessarily going to be the best plan overall if you're looking at it from an equilibrium type of perspective. So, and then also that also begs the question of that other video that I did a long time ago. I think it was called "Expectation is the Killer of Joy" or "Limitation is a Bitch." One of those. I kind of spoke it out, but if I spoke about it in both, but that's assuming the first one is even real. So when it comes to me checking the astrology, that reminded me about how Jupiter is in Gemini right now. And Jupiter doesn't necessarily like to be in Gemini because Jupiter is about expansion, travel, higher learning, and those kind of energies to do with more of an expansive or broad sense of being or sense of seeing things, right? So this is why it rules over Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is also can give off that expansive energy in many forms. So when it comes to it being in Gemini, that's the opposite sign of Jupiter. So it's time right now, and it has been for quite a while. So honestly, I should have talked about this earlier on, but I saw a whole bunch of other people talking about it, and I just thought, you know what? Let me just do my thing. Because at the moment, I wasn't really fully like confident in this whole like YouTube thing, let alone even astrology. Like I was still confident in general, but more building up my confidence. So when it came to that, I was just like, oh, let me just leave it for the experts. Let me just leave it for the people who I know, like, kind of have it more in the bag. So, as well, let me take this shit off. When it came to that video that I was talking about, with limitation as a bitch, it plays out as a form of a expectation as well. So that can also be a limitation that stops you from experiencing the experience to the fullest extent that you could have experienced it, because you had a plan in mind. And so it's not necessarily bad to have a plan in general, but when you sometimes plan a lot, or just certain times you might plan and you might get overly attached to the plan, and then that becomes an expectation or a limitation. And so that'll restrict you from being able to fully experience and enjoy everything about that experience completely. Because now you're looking at it from a bias. Like, you only want the expectation or the plan to play out. And that's like what will lead you to experiencing a lot of turmoil. But then you would probably plan and think that that was a way to solve your turmoil, but without realizing that that's actually the cause of why you keep suffering, because you keep having an expectation or a plan about something. So it's restricting you from like really fully expressing and being yourself. And that's kind of a lot to do with the energy right now with Taurus, with Gemini and Jupiter, because Gemini doesn't necessarily, Sagittarius doesn't necessarily like to plan about things. Sagittarius more rather experience, go through the experience and just be, And then of course, when it comes to other signs that are fire signs too, that's kind of more the energy, it's those. But with air, that's more of a planning energy, and Gemini is the opposite of Sag, like I said. So it's making you feel like you need to plan or overly analyze an experience before going through it. But Jupiter really wants to expand and just go through the experience a lot of the time. So you need to find that balance between those two, because right now you would feel more teetered towards the Gemini energy, and it's not necessarily the right energy to play out right now, because it is in Jupiter and it's opposite. So you're going to be playing out like an opposing energy. So it's all about harmonizing and finding more balance, and that will be the way that you can kind of gain more peace in each of these situations. So if you're going and harmonizing with an alignment itself that is opposing, then that's not necessarily the way to go. You want to bring the balance back in, and through opposition, you bringing the balance is you jumping more into that Jupiterian energy of just being and experiencing. So now you're teetering the scales back to Jupiter. So Jupiter can experience more of that fulfillment of energy rather than feeling so opposite. And so you play out as a balancing act between Jupiter and Gemini, rather than like, this is not necessarily how it actually is, by the way, guys. This is just a metaphor or a way to explain it so that you can understand the energy. But the energy is real, don't forget that. So, yeah, right now, obviously, this is a perfect video to do, because we're going through it. We're in the thick of this energy as well. And we're also going into we're in Uranus and Taurus too. And Uranus and Taurus is all about changing and rebelling against old ways of stability, security, safety, and shelter. So anything you find security and stability and expectations, limitations, all of those kind of things are built from comfort zones as well in some areas. So you've got to break out of those, because Uranus is kind of forcing everyone, or we're forcing ourselves, because we are the alignments, we are the stars at the end of the day. So it's not like we're getting influenced by the wave. We are the wave that influences, but a lot of people are in like that influenced energy because of the way that people have trained their brains and their minds and the way they interact and relate to things, because they're more into that energy of doing things secondhand, after someone's already done it, and instead of learning firsthand by going through the experience themselves, you know. So this is like how everyone's kind of living more backwards in terms of we should be getting first-hand wisdom and knowledge generally, like, and nobody should really have to teach anyone. We should actually easily be able to teach ourselves. But when people become reliant on teaching, and then everyone like has to make it a thing instead of realizing like, oh, I can actually teach a lot of things for myself. But because people are lost in distractions, at the end of the day though, it's not my life, it's their life. So I'm not going to sit here and judge, but it's something to be aware of, you know, when you're looking at the world. So you can sort of grasp why things are the way they are, why people act the way they act. And as much as people will say, you know, it may be for one thing, but the experience and whatever you're expanding and growing into, it shows what you actually are in, you know, because you can only expand and grow into something if you first plant the seed for that specific plant to grow. And this is esoterically speaking. So if they've planted a seed, that's the way it's going to grow. So there's certain things that people may think, oh, this is constantly happening to me, but without realizing that they're probably planting the seed for that experience to grow from something they think about or how they feel, you know. And that's also a perfect example of what I'm talking about, because I've planted a lot of those seeds in the past of limitation, expectation, and not going through an experience, not just jumping into the experience. Mind you, when I was in high school though, I was pretty good at that. But then when I was like in my early 20s, I'm still in my early 20s, what am I talking about? Like I'm in my late teens and to like 20s is when I started to become more restricted and limited. And more, and then those limitations and constantly growing as seeds, and then they'll constantly keep on growing, and then you'll keep planting more because you're going through that experience. But if you're in that state of knowing how to detach from the 3D, you'll be able to get out of it. But if you're constantly attaching all your things to the 3D, then you're most likely going to be like, oh my gosh, woe is me. And then you start to get into an even deeper cycle, because now you're planting seeds based on the seeds that you've already planted, without realizing that now you've planted so many seeds that you've actually constantly created like this weird cycle of you constantly going through the same experience over and over again, and then not realizing that you were the one who first planted that first seed for that experience to even become what it is today. So, but it's always teamwork makes the dream work as well. So can't get lost into thinking that you're the only one. It takes two to tango, you know. So when it came to this video, you know, this is one of the perfect videos of the example of what I'm talking about, like I was saying before, and just see like my mannerisms and my actions, because there's the teaching moments for me too, when I start to say, oh, okay, this is the way things play out when I act in this energy, or I jump into this space, as opposed to when I'm jumping into a space of expectation or limitation. And so I still like to plan, but when it came to this video in particular, I was overly thinking about it. So the best way for me to make and execute this video was for me to not have a plan at all, and just have a loose idea, a general idea of what the video was going to be, and then this start to evolve and start to grow into something more. But that's because I also do the shadow work behind closed doors, not because I just jump on the video and I just like magically do it. This is just a fraction of like what I already do on my day, like in my daily life. Otherwise you wouldn't be able to see it as such an example on the video, you know. So the energy that people are most in is usually going to show, and because I'm in this kind of energy like pretty much all the time, I'm always trying to be accountable, always doing shadow work. And shadow work is just a way being aware of your certain things that you might be unconscious of. So building up on more awareness about different sides of yourself, different aspects, different mentalities, and also just mentalities that you can be influenced by. All of that kind of stuff is like shadow work. So don't get lost into thinking, oh my gosh, shadow work, what's he talking about? Is that like some evil shit? Like, no. It's literally just a form of healing, babes. So it's just you being able to kind of identify your negative aspects, but also it's not even limited to just the negative aspects of yourself. Just identifying things that you're unconscious about in general. So that's why it's hence the term shadow. So you're going into your internal space and you're like clearing up and healing and bringing light to the shadows, you know, bringing your awareness to the darkness, bringing light to the dark. So that's basically just a breakdown of what you're doing with shadow work. And so you're working on that, obviously. So you're working, that's something that you work on and you work at every single day. So you're building up that energy of like, it's almost like a clairvoyant type of energy. But clairvoyance is more a little bit different because you're like clearing your mind. Shadow work, you're focusing on something, but you're also doing like an act of clearing it as you're focusing on it by being aware of it. And then allowing yourself to not be aware of that thing anymore. Or limit your awareness. And so I'm slowly limiting my awareness as well by doing more of these type of videos, by jumping more in this type of energy. Even behind closed doors, you know, I'll notice and I'll pick myself up in certain experiences where I'm overthinking or worrying and just be like, okay, now I just need to jump into this experience, because if I just sit here and constantly think, I'm going to talk myself out of it. So I like to nip it in the butt, because otherwise then once I start talking myself out of it, then that gets even harder, you know, that gets even more difficult than if I had have just done it before I was talking myself out of it, or before I talked myself out of it kind of thing, because now I have to talk myself back into it, as opposed to if I'm just like at that medium stage, I can still be like, okay, nah, fuck it, who cares, you know, like it's not that big of a deal. And then you won't notice as much negativity from that experience too, because you didn't put so much heaviness, so much thoughts and feelings into it, and you just allowed it to be free and light, and you just allowed yourself to go through the experience, and then you don't attach anything to it. You don't attach an expectation, a bias, a worry, or anything. So you're just like able to see it for what it is, and you jump into it for like a clear cut, clean experience. All right. And on that note, I think that is a good freaking way to end this video, because I feel like there's not really much else you can say about this one. It's pretty clear cut, it's pretty straightforward, it's pretty... So I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and I will see you guys in the next video.